Hello, welcome to the LD Nutrition Stadium. Welcome to Rugby League Backchat. Today my guests are Damian Irvine of Bradford Bulls, Michael Carter of Wakefield Trinity, and James Ford of the York City Knights. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So much to talk about this week in Rugby League, as always. Michael, I'd like to start with you. 21 games in the first season of the restructure of the Super League as a competition. As a stakeholder in Super League, what's your take on progress today?
21 games, it's been tough, but from our club's point of view. We've hit a bit of a momentous injury list this year. I think I counted up 15 major injuries and operations. But I think we've got in Super League a competition which has never been as close before, give or take that Saints are running away with it at the top. But the feeling amongst the other clubs that you can go anywhere and win a game, which certainly when I started in 2013-14, there were times where we were looking at a game away at Wigan or Saints and thinking, we just can't win there, we're not going to win there. And now we feel that we can go anywhere and give anybody a game. And I think from the closeness of the competition outside of the top two, you've got 8 or 9 clubs, I think, separated by six or 8 points. So, I think from a competition point of view, it's been great. We probably all didn't envisage kind of being in a relegation battle from third downwards.
I'll come on to that. Yeah.
But you don't. Sometimes you get a consequence of a decision that you weren't aware of at the time. So, we've set this in place. I think it's been great. There's been some really good competitive games this year, and some surprises along the way. And I think. Sure. A lot of kudos to teams like London. Everybody thought they weren't going to win a game, and they're sat there and they're fighting and competing, and we've been battered twice by them. So it's all kudos to London.
Absolutely. Damian, your chairman was particularly vocal last season at the restructuring plans by the Super League clubs. What's your club's take on Super League?
Oh, look, I think you'd have to ask the chairman if that particular view, and I think there was a lot of discussion around a lot of clubs and the whole game around structure, and so there should be, I guess. In my view, competitive, meaningful rugby league week in, week out is what the game needs, because it's all about broadcasting, it's all about viewers and people through the gates. So there are always negative sides to that, the jeopardy of relegation and battling as well, as there is a final series to look forward to for that runaway leader. So I guess I'm quite used to that, coming from an NRL system where you're really battling every year to get in that top 8, and then it starts all over again. I might like to see something that's a little bit more weighted towards that final series, giving teams that even just scrape in a little bit more levity to get in there. It's no longer the case in the NRL that the minor premiers are guaranteed of being, probably the favourite through the final series. So, look, I think it's great, and I think that the restructure, there's a lot of detail discussed around the restructure, and I think we probably were trying to fix things that we weren't really probably needing to fix at the time. I think so many more arguments got tossed into the argument about the restructure that we sort of lost sight of what it was about, what the competition structure should look like. It got way too political, and a whole bunch of other stuff was thrown in, where the real issue was that restructure. And I think the game's probably in a place now with the Super League system and then the RFL system that if it's not right and it needs tinkering in the next year or so, I think the game's probably mature enough, or I hope it is, to tinker with it and have a look. I think things have settled down enough to that level, Michael, wouldn't you say, to be able to say, let's chop and change it a little bit and tailor it?
I'd agree. I mean, if you've got something wrong, with hindsight, you go back and change it in a mature fashion, like Damian suggested. The couple of things I forgot to mention when we set out on this journey of restructure is that two of the main things for us were certainty of fixtures throughout the season, because that was the feedback we were getting from fans that come August and September, they had absolutely no idea what the games were, and got 10 days notice, and had booked holidays and had booked to go away and weren't going to change those plans. And the other feedback was from season ticket holders, again on a similar basis, saying that, we don't know what a third of our games were, and we don't know whether we can get there, so we're not going to buy a season ticket. So we addressed those, and certainly from us, we've seen our season ticket growth go up by, I think, around 6%. So it certainly worked on that point from us.
Sure. James, you're sitting second in the championship. One eye maybe on next season. How do you see the Super League season?
First of all, certainly haven't got one eye on next season. You know, very much got both eyes on Batley next week. They're a good side, and you know, if we don't perform anywhere near our best, you know, Batley will beat us, mate. No, that's for sure. In terms of the Super League season or the Super League on its own, I like how it's changed over the last few years. You know, we bemoaned a lack of competitive games, you know, lopsided scorelines, and clubs not being able to compete with the really big clubs. Now that's pretty much gone, not completely. And like Michael said, you've got your Londons capable of going and beating Wakefield, St Helens, and it gives a very competitive competition. And you know, if you're looking forward towards the international games, we often blamed that lack of consistency, that lack of intensity on us not being able to beat Australia consistently. And now you've got games what are right in the balance, you know, for a high percentage of the season, and hopefully that'll come through and help the national side go one step further.
Does London's success this season inspire?
I love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah,
the championship clubs.
Well,
we're looking for that top 5.
Well, London are a slightly different kettle of fish to York because they were full time anyway.
Yeah.
But they've got two of the liveliest up and coming coaches I've had the pleasure to meet, and every time they perform, whether even against Castleford, who I support, you know, I kind of wanted London to win. And the story they're writing is fantastic. I watched the Toronto game, and you know, for 70 minutes I still didn't believe they could win. I'd probably like the vast majority of people watching it, and they did. And then you've looked at, you know, the other squads around in Super League, and you think, well, it's going to be a toll for them. But every week they turn up and they surprise people, and they're continuing to improve. And what a story it would be if they can keep them up.
Absolutely. All the stories in Rugby League and Super League are about the relegation battle. The energy really isn't in the top 5 battle right now. Is that good? Is that ideal? Are we seeing, you know, tense, rather error-strewn games because of it?
I think that may be a consequence of the fact that it is the first year of this new structure. So, and probably more teams have got caught up in that relegation battle than we envisaged at the start.
Is there fear in Super League now because of London's success?
Well, I think you should always be fearful of relegation. You know, there are massive consequences for any club that gets relegated from Super League. You only have to look at the last 2 years with what Lee went through with to start with, and obviously what Widnes have gone through this year.
And Bradford, they went through the horrors. Bradford
have been through the horrors as well. It's not easy. You know, if it was easy, we'd all know the solution for getting out of it. There are tough decisions to make the moment you get relegated. And I think the quicker you address those decisions, the better the chance you've got of A, preserving your club, and B, bouncing back if you can.
Could you ever envisage, though, out of 6 matches every round, 3 of them are relegation battles?
Well, I think we do need to focus or try and focus on St Helens at the minute. Absolutely. They're playing an outstanding brand of rugby league. You know, we get the perverse sort of thing thrown at us that everything's been dumbed down and it's to the lowest common denominator now. I think that St Helens side are absolutely fantastic. I've watched them 5-6 times this year. I think they're a great advert for rugby league, the way they play. And they're certainly my favourites to go on and win the double. I've probably put the curse of all time on them now. But I think there has to be, from a Super League's point of view, we have to try and focus more attention on that battle at the top. As Damian says, when it gets to the playoffs, I think St Helens do get a bye in the sort of first round of playoffs, so they get that thing for winning the League Leaders Shield. You know, I think they've got every chance of going on and being a really powerful side this year.
Good.
Is it the fact of broadcasting, Michael? It's interesting you talk about the scheduling, which is so important for supporters and all that. And as I see it, one of the main reasons scheduling needs to be locked in or can be locked in, there's an argument there that they'll say, well, if they lock in the TV fixtures at the start of the season, you can get games towards the end of the year that aren't meaningful or aren't the right games. And certainly that was the case in the NRL for a long time. They only put out the games 4 or 5 weeks in advance because they would wait to see what the big games were coming up, and month to month that changed. But with the financial system around the way the Super League is set up, is it not right that clubs get paid when they are on Sky? They get a bonus sort of money. and that's odd to me because I think the whole pot should be split evenly across all the clubs. So regardless of whether, and St Helens should be on the television a lot, they're fantastic, as you say. But that shouldn't be as a detriment to clubs that might not be in the battle. They should, you know what I'm saying? If you split the revenue evenly across it, then you wouldn't have the issue of scheduling.
Perversely, Sky are actually focusing on the relegation battle. If you think
that's where the excitement is,
rather than
which is good for those clubs because they're getting the fee each week, I would imagine. But if one club gets 10 games on Sky and gets their £5,000 or £10,000 bonus, what about the club that gets 3? It's all one competition and one TV deal.
Let me explain. I had a question about this week, that at the start of the season, every club gives £80,000 of their central distribution into what's called the TV pot. And then for a Thursday night game, you get £20,000 back. For a Friday night game, you get £15,000 back after the first one. So the first one is free. In the 6 years that I've been doing this, I've never had more than the 80k back. I've only had it back in 1 year. Every other year I've been under the 80k. So it's been a kind of a big gripe of mine that I'm with you. I think it should just be
just a lot of money in revenue.
So you get some clubs that will earn 160k out of the TV pot and some clubs that get 40k. And for me, it's just redistributing the wealth in the wrong manner. But that's how it's been and that's how we live with it. I think the problem with scheduling all the fixtures at the start of the season is exactly what you say. We don't know what games come round 20 or 21 that we actually want to watch, but they're already fixed. But conversely to that, if you don't pick your Thursday night games and you leave them till 4 or 5 weeks before the game's going to be played, that can have a knock-on effect on the games after and the games before. Because if you've got a club that's on the Sunday before the Thursday night game, they then have to move that to the Friday. So it's a tricky one that you've got to try and plan as many games as you can. But I think we've planned to round 23 at the minute, so there's still the last 6 rounds to pan out. And we've got, I think, all our home games now are on a Sunday after Castleford on Friday. And if we end up going to a Thursday night on one of our games, then we have to move that other game as well. So it's a tricky one. I don't think there's any one answer to it. It's again, review. Can we improve? And if we can, let's do it.
I'd like to come back to the battle that's taking everybody's focus, which is a battle to avoid the drop. It's so costly. In a 12-team league, one side being relegated is so costly. I don't know if you've looked at this yet, James, but because you are sitting well in the championship. But the challenges facing the promoted side are enormous. You've got 3 months to put the Super League side together. Most of the available players are not available. They've been signed up by somebody else. And your existing players are going to have to step up to the plate in terms of faster pace, greater intensity, and so on. It's an enormous challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that challenge runs throughout the whole league. So when we were in League One, you're looking to re-sign or sign players before you've been promoted, and players are unsure, and the same the Championship to Super League, and I'm sure London were in that boat. And I think if you look at what London have done, they've signed they re-signed a lot of good young up and coming players.
Definitely.
And they've invested in the culture. They believe in hard work. They believe in improving players. They believe in people, and it's still led to them being competitive. And I'm sure if London, the stronger position they're in this year, I would imagine that'll reflect in the squad they put together next year. And I'm sure Danny and Jamie will hopefully take that club onto new strengths.
All that good work this year will be actually lost, won't it, if they go down again this year? So, you've got a strong foundation to build upon.
There's a lot of young London-based players in that squad who are on the periphery at the minute. A couple played against us on the weekend for Sheffield, Young Meadows and Ogden.
Yes, they're outstanding.
And they'll probably get 5-10 appearances this year. And if London don't quite stay up, I'm sure they'll be the spine of their side next year. And with coaches of that calibre, I'm sure they could continue developing them and challenge again. I quite like the philosophy what they've got, where they don't come in and overspend and put the club at risk. And they believe in the training and they believe in the development. And we've got no choice at York, so I'm hoping they can get it right and we can follow suit.
But what's also interesting is right now, right in the real business end of the season, they're not panicking. They're not signing loan players. They're not sacking the coach. They're not doing what other clubs have done.
Well, wouldn't you just love to play for Danny Ward?
Absolutely.
You know, he's so relaxed.
I know Danny well. He's a great guy.
And that is how he comes across in the media. That, you know, he's very authentic, and that's how he is. You know, there will be no pressure as such on the players. They'll just turn up and perform to their maximum as individuals, as units, as a team. And you know, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's clearly rooting for him.
Yeah. Everything about that London club this year has to be applauded. It has to be applauded. From how they've come up, and like I said, didn't make kind of major signings or anything. They gave all the players that have got them up the chance, and they have performed. They've been brilliant for the competition.
Look how it's reignited Jordan Abdul's career, for example. He's playing the best rugby of his career now.
I think seeing how many players have potentially been touted to go to other clubs next year just speaks volumes for how they've done as a club.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to ride the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Michael's just said that he's had a terrible injury toll and issues at Wakefield, but, you know, they're at a rough patch now. But if you pick and stick, if you ride through that, London have shown that if they were relegated, I'm sure they would keep a core wherever they can and look next year and patience for that. Ad hoc and retrospective, reactive loan buying in and players and shuffling, it's not the answer. It's very short term.
It is a panic.
And it falls apart.
Yeah. Guys, got to wrap it up there. That's it for part 1. See you again for part 2 very shortly.
You've spoken and we've listened. Rugby League Backchat is available on podcast form from all your best podcast providers. If you're on a trip down the M62 or a flight to Toronto or Toulouse, download Rugby League Backchat for the best debate inside Rugby League.
Welcome back to part 2 of Rugby League Backchat. James, I want to talk about the Championship, please. All the focus in the Championship right now is in the top 5, which I guess most people would be happy that it's gone that way. You're currently sitting second. There's probably about 7 teams that are fighting for those top 5 positions. How do you see the Championship so far?
It's an immensely difficult competition. You know, every side is capable of beating any side. You know, we went to Rochdale and we were very lucky to come away with a win. You know, if that game goes on 5 more minutes, I reckon we lose that game. And I think that shows just how competitive teams can be. We've got 7 games left, and you know, we'll need to be at 9, 10 out of 10 for each of those games. Otherwise, we'll lose them. But that's how it should be. You know, we didn't want to be in League One where there were some games where you pretty much were guaranteed to win those games. We wanted to be tested every single week by a better calibre of players, by a better calibre of teams and coaches, and we're really enjoying it. It's tiring, but we're loving every minute of it.
Okay, great. What about Bradford? You're in the mix as well.
Yeah, and I think the system, I think it's probably an example of the restructuring at the end of last year. It's working because that top 5 is still aspirational for a number of clubs on the fringe and outside, so it's still quite interesting. If you're 2 or 4 points off of that 5th position, you're still in with a shot. And I think it also endorses what we talked about prior to the break there about picking and sticking. I know John Keir had a lot of injury issues early in the season, and a great Challenge Cup win against Leeds, then a very flat period after some injuries and some bad results. But didn't make wholesale changes, didn't bring in replacements for Dane Chisholm and others, and sort of stuck with what he had, knowing that the season's long enough to build into it again, and Bulls are just on the edge there of the 5. So I think it probably endorses strong competition in an interesting structure, and it's a really exciting competition. But as James said, you don't know. The Bulls went away and won very well in Toulouse in a great result on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee it's just as tough to have Swinton come into Odsal to try and play them on Sunday, backing up from that. So it's tough.
Just touching on the Bradford situation there, I'm really pleased that John didn't go and sign some more players on loan, because they've got some really good young kids coming from. They've got a great academy side. You know, John Bassin, you to oversee that. And there's some really top young kids in that system. You know, people like Rowan Mills, I know he's injured now, but it's been fantastic to see Rowan play in the Championship and play pretty well. And you must be pretty excited about some of the players you've got.
I think it is endorsement on John and Andrew and the way they've set up the structure there, not to be reactive like that. It's very easy to panic a little bit when Rowan was injured and Dane left, and you know there's fan pressure. There always is, because fans want to see where's that new signing coming in. But John stuck to his guns there and said, no, I know what we've got here. We're building as a squad, and I know where it's going to come through. And Jordan Lilly and Joe Keys coming back have really started to play very, very well. And it's a credit to them for that. I like to see more longer term substance planning, and that's what they've done there, is you know, rather than that ad hoc sort of try and find a quick solution. So it's an interesting month coming up, really exciting for the Championship.
Has the reserves benefited Bradford, do you think, in that respect?
Massively,
yeah.
Because you've got lads that are playing men's rugby league, you know, midweek or on weekends, that are ready to step in when time comes. Yeah. And I think it's shown there's been some injury in the centres, and players coming back in that are allowed to have. I mean, Joe Keys wouldn't have had any rugby league for 6 or 8 months, but he played 1 or 2 reserve grade games into first grade and in good form. You need it. You do need it.
Well, we watched the game last week, didn't we? Wakefield and Bradford at the Mobile Rocket Stadium, 24-all. It was a great game. Yes. Really good game to watch.
No, I think you need it. There is a massive step up, as you know, from 19, 20-year-olds playing rugby league to men's rugby.
I want to talk about the reserves, guys, because compulsory reserves next year in Super League, all but guaranteed, I think. What will that mean to dual registration?
It is a tricky one, I think. You know, we'll be looking at the kids that we've had in our, or eventually played first team this year. Jack Croft, Lee Kershaw, Connor Bailey was in the squad, Titus Guaze. We're probably going to look at them staying within our reserve structure rather than going out on loan or dual reg for next year, unless we feel that it is the benefit to the player himself to be playing at a championship level, for instance. You know, if we feel that a player will get more out of playing in a sort of top 5 championship club, then it's probably something we'll look at. But I don't see us doing a wholesale dual reg. We haven't this year. You know, we've got a relationship with Newcastle where from time to time the odd player will go up there and have a game. But to be fair to Newcastle, they haven't been knocking on our door asking for players anyway. So the reserves have been invaluable for us for this year, because we've had a lot of players that couldn't have played academy rugby but couldn't get a game in the first team structure either.
James, from a championship coach's point of view, we know at Featherstone they've had 20 players on dual registration so far, and they are fighting for a top 5 position. What's your view of that?
Good question. Well, first of all, probably should concede that York have used dual registration previously. Copped a little bit of stick as a coach for that, but in the situation we were in, we needed it. We didn't have reserves. We didn't have a massive resource of players. We didn't have a massive amount of funds to go out and sign players. And the relationship with UKR really benefited us. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that. The link between Leeds and Featherstone is a really positive one. You know, it helps Featherstone field a really strong side. I mean, some of the calibre of some of the...
What will they do next season if Leeds have to field reserves?
Well, fortunately for me, that's not my issue.
Exactly.
I'll leave that to Ryan Carr and Mark and the Featherstone board.
Ryan's on the Leeds coaching staff as well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I feel like you're trying to throw me under the bus here.
You know, it's a great question, but that's rugby league. And this is what we've got to understand. We talked about maturity before. Just because James has got a number 1 job, and that's to look after York and do his best job with what he can under the rules and under the current system. And Fev have got that exact same task, and the chairman and the CEOs and the coach of that has got that job to do. So just because they use the dual reg system at the moment, or they bring in a lot of loan players at the moment, because at the moment they need to use that to get the best result for their club, doesn't necessarily mean that theoretically or they believe in that as being the best for the game or the structure in the big term. But you've got to play under the rules you've got to play under and do your best for your club. Number 1 job, you turn up every Monday, that's what you're there to do. So.
Everybody knew the rules at the start of the season. They've not done anything wrong. They've just used the system that they believe would be best for them for this season.
And they are developing a reserve side as well. So I would imagine they have got a 3 to 5 year plan about maybe not using dual registration, maybe developing their own players. Exactly. They have done it really effectively previously. And, hopefully get back to that.
I don't think it's at all good. You've got to have homegrown players that are in that colours, that the young kids from 10-year-old come up and watch through the system. You've got to have club people as players, number one, for people to come through the gates. So I don't agree with the system, but it's all right to use it while it's there. Change the system if you don't like it.
And that's not just Featherstone. You know, I have that for Wakefield as well. I counted up last night. We've had 11 players play for us this year that have come through our academy out of, I think, 27 players used or something like that. So that's certainly been where we've been going.
That's the secret, isn't it?
You know what Simon Wolford said the other week, and I listened to it, and I just thought, wow, it makes such sense. I've never thought of it that way. He was talking about they'll have to develop their own top Super League players, because realistically, top Super League players like Sean O'Loughlin don't often move clubs, certainly not to Huddersfield. So they have to make them. And I just when he said it, I just thought, wow. And then you look at their squad list. I know they've brought in Ollie from you guys. Who I'm pleased.
That's good business.
Yeah. You look at the squad list. They've got so many academy graduates in there with so much potential, and you can see they might be in that relegation fight now, but if they get it right in terms of their development, then they could be at the other end of the tables pretty shortly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's getting your plans in place at 14 and 16. You know, you go back 10 years in Wakefield, every decent player in Wakefield went to Wigan. That's just what happened. Now we've had Jack Croft, Connor Bailey, Titus Gwaze, Tom Johnston, Max Jowett, Jordan Crowley. You know, you can just ring them, and they're all starting to come through. And that's where we've put a massive amount of focus on our academy structure. And Mark Applegarth's done a great job for us in finding players and then bringing them through the entire system. Bradford have had a great academy system under John, like you said, and it's definitely the way to go.
And in the financial realities of the new broadcasting deal, which is not widely expected to be greater than it is now, it may lie in other areas, who knows, that homegrown talent, that kind of almost motivation to want to form your first team squad largely from your homegrown players, that's got to be the way forward, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly for clubs like us, you know, we've not got the potential to go out and buy a massive marquee Australian player or pay transfer fees to other clubs to bring youngsters in. So that's where we've put all of our focus. But just to pick you up on a point that you've started that with, we've spent 18 months talking our game down, and I'm sure Damian will agree with this, through all the machinations of what's gone on. And all we've said over the last 18 months is our new TV deal is going to be worse than the current one. We've got to get out of that thinking. Absolutely. We've got to say, we've got a product that's fantastic to watch. We need to market it better, and we all know that. But let's get out there and say, this is not a product that's a declining financial product. Let's get out there and say, get the best broadcast deal we can absolutely get.
I couldn't agree with you more,
We just talked about half an hour about how relegation battles and promotion battles and how exciting the top two tiers are, and it is. So it's it's the best product.
Yeah.
It really is super.
Well, 3 tiers for me, because League One has just been as exciting. You know, there's probably, I think, 6 or 7 teams there vying for them spots to get up as well. So structurally, we have made massive improvements on it.
And I love the way Toronto market the game. You know, it's a fun day out. You know, it's not this sort of abrasive tribal thing that is quite familiar in rugby league. It's just fans mingling, having a few beers together, having fun. You know, I love the way they do that.
You've got to look on our own doorstep what makes clubs and what makes rugby league successful. You talked about not having the funds to go and buy a big Australian marquee, Michael, and if you had them, I wouldn't suggest you did it anyway, because the fact is, an Australian marquee will probably excite, and your core fans who are already season ticket holders will know their background and they'll be excited to watch that person play. It probably won't change your gate too much for those people that aren't rugby league people, that a guy who's a big name in Australia is playing this sport that we don't really know. What will change it though is if you've got 12 lads who are from the local area playing in your first team, and each one of those has probably got a core of 50 to 70 to 100 of greater, you know, from his school year, from the street he lives in, from where mum and dad work, and all of this will get an interest and come along. And you've got 70 people coming along because of your 10 guys. Mate, you're getting close to 1,000 people all of a sudden who are interested in the locals, and that feeds out because everyone knows everyone in your community. Much better than bringing in
Couldn't agree more.
export.
Just want to talk quickly about another issue pervading social media at the moment, the venue for the championship final. Do you have a view on that, James?
I'll delete my social media. So,
I need to do that.
yeah, it saves you a lot of time. I'm not sure where I got this from, but at the start of the season, I was under the impression that we're going to be at a neutral venue, similar to when Castleford and Widnes played. And I went to that Heading Lane. It was a great day. Really enjoyed it, obviously. So that was my impression. But you know, I know previously the last few years it's been at the highest ranking club.
£1 million game was.
It'd be tough for Toronto, that one, to come in, flying over to York at a week's notice.
Yeah.
Joking.
We've got enough neutral stadia within an hour's drive of all of the areas here to have it in a neutral venue and put the money back into a rugby league club.
But has David Argyle been promised that if Toronto finish top, the championship final will be in Toronto? I'm not sure.
That's asked David.
I'm not sure.
But I doubt that'd be the case. I wouldn't have thought.
What we don't want to do is cheese people like David Argyle off, do we? You know, he didn't get promoted last season. He's been wrapped over the knuckles for inappropriate comments, and now we might be taking the championship final away from him. I think, you know, is there a danger that we?
I'm sure it'd be clear. I think we're making a mountain out of a mole. I'm pretty sure that at the start of the season, people will have addressed this and they'll know where this game has been played. If there's any kind of mitigating circumstances to be taken into account, they'll be aware of that. I'm head coach. I'm not interested. All I'm going to do is try and get there.
Of course.
All right, and I just think we should leave it to the people who are paid to make them decisions.
We all remember those fantastic championship finals that were at neutral venues, though, because they were almost game-wide events, weren't they? It wasn't just the supporters of the two clubs, and so it created what rugby league craves for, which is big events that the whole game can get behind.
It comes down to structure. Michael said there, you know, the minor premier or the people at the top get a bye in the first round. They get an advantage already in the final series. They give them two advantages by having a home final as well as, a ranking in the final system.
I think we're all about creating events. We've got the grand final, we've got the Challenge Cup final, we've got Magic Weekend, we've got the Summer Bash. We've got to create more events. If you hold the Championship playoff final at Headingley, you will get neutrals going to that game. I'll go. I'll go for sure, regardless of who's in it. I'll go and watch it, and I'm not in the minority there. There'll be a lot of people want to attend that event.
Yeah, and just briefly, Michael, if Toronto are promoted this season with all their vast resources, what would Super League look like next year?
Well, I think they've still got to have challenges with that. There's a salary cap to play with that I'm presuming they will spend a salary cap, but you've still got to find the players. And I think what you're finding in Super League, certainly from clubs like ours, is that a lot of clubs now are holding on to the players that they've got. They're not letting players get to the end of the contracts and seeing them disappear to other clubs. We're all fighting to keep the players that we want to keep. So they've got a challenge on in attracting certainly English players. I've no doubt that they'll bring probably a couple of overseas players in. But to me, London have provided ample challenge, as I've said already. They beat us twice very, very easily. So I don't think Toronto are going to bring anything more than London have brought in terms of on the field. London have been fantastic. So they will be in the mix, Toronto. There's no doubt. When you've got players like Ricky Latelli and that sort of breed of player, they're going to be a challenge for sure.
Okay, have to stop it there. That's the end of part 2. And we'll look forward to the final part of the show in a few moments' time. Welcome back to the third and final part of this week's Back Chat. Michael, some game-changing news almost have come out of Robert Elson's camp around discussions with equity companies looking to invest in sport. We've seen this already in rugby union. They've had a huge windfall from a private equity company already. I appreciate this is hugely confidential, but what's your initial take on it?
I think any investment into Super League Rugby League is massively welcome.
Will it be Rugby League or Super
Well,
League?
I'm talking about game-wide. Any investment into our game, we can't afford as a game to turn down, in my opinion. So whether it's the new Betfred deal with Super League and that follows into Championship and League One, David Argyle, you talked about earlier, guys, owners coming into the game and investing their money into it. We are not in a position like football where we can be so picky that we can't refuse investment into the game. So I welcome any investment, and like you say, it's confidential at the minute, but any investment into our game is welcome.
How do you see it, Damian?
Oh, 100%. I mean, investment comes in many forms. Football is supported by investment, generally privateers who prop up massive losses in every club from the 92 down every year. So whilst the FA and the leagues are independent and not private equity held at all, certainly most clubs are, majority of them. So you have to have it, either way. Our sport here won't survive without private equity. The clubs don't survive without chair people and their supporters popping in cash flow every month. That's just the game we've got. So, and that won't change, regardless of how good the TV deal is in future. You're still going to need that assistance. So, and I wouldn't look at it as whether it be Super League or League One or Championship gets that investment, because, as we just talked about, you need players, and the Championship and League One provide the HR pool, the product, the talent. For Super League clubs. So whatever the deal is, the private equity people coming in, and Robert, I'm sure, will work out in the Super League clubs, the right structure to make sure that the funding for the Championship and other clubs are there to produce the talent that they will look for. And that might be a wider dual red structure or some sort of a parent club structure going on, which are feeder clubs, which is a big model in New South Wales and in Queensland, where the larger NRL clubs have deals with 2 or 3 New South Wales Cup or Queensland Cup sides where they help fund it. And our funding doesn't have to be cash. A Super League club might provide the analyst, the physiotherapist and the defensive coach for a club who can't ordinarily afford to do that, a fitness coach. So you can really support the game financially. And I know if most Championship clubs had 3 staff members supported by, a Super League structure who would train through Super League and all that, that'd be a massive issue for the bottom line. It'd help so much, having things that you can't ordinarily afford.
But we don't want this cash to go to Australian players at the end of their career,
Or
like
their
we saw at
agents.
the beginning of Super
Or
League.
their
Nor
agents.
their agents.
No.
We want to see it in junior development.
Yeah.
We want to see it in facilities. We want to see it in marketing the game. Yeah. That would be a tremendous.
So I say it doesn't have to be cash. Cash is probably the worst thing it could be, to be fair, because that'll go into paying back directors' loans or frittered away here and there. It'll become a wasteful culture. The right way to do it would be to set up a quota, and motor racing's a really good model for it. Motor racing outside of Formula One has models where clubs can only, the racing teams can only have so many tyres, so many engines, so many staff and all that around. Now, if you had a strong model where all Championship clubs and League One clubs had to have X amount of staff in key positions, which were about player welfare and development and skills coaching, X amount of IT and digital marketing support, and spend their money in HR support and welfare support, then it might be a team of 6 or 8, the model. If that was centrally funded, forget the cash, the clubs would be so much more better off, and it would be a really strong model to build the whole game.
And there's a massive element that I've been remiss of in community clubs. So Heworth in York, Dudley Hills, we've got Criggleston and a whole range of community clubs, Loch Lane and Castleford. That's where the players are coming from. I went to watch a game a week last Sunday, Loch Lane versus Emily Moore. Great game of rugby. Loch Lane have got some great kids, and that's where our next generation of players are all coming from. So we've got to invest in them clubs as well.
And where your game's coming from when you play on a Sunday or Thursday night. The stakeholders are the first through the gates.
Yeah. There is, however, a word of caution. These guys are hard-nosed financiers. There's one reason why they're investing money in this. It's for their return on investment. They're going to set some fairly tough financial targets, I would think, and they're going to put some imposing key performance indicators down as well. But it's a major opportunity nonetheless.
But shouldn't we have those standards anyway? We should have those standards anyway. As a governing body or whoever, we should impose them on ourselves.
This will be going up several notches, I suspect.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's a wonderful opportunity.
They're going to want the game to succeed if they're putting millions of pounds in, I guarantee. And the way to do that is do it smart and support it and grow it.
And if they succeed, we succeed.
But isn't the real benefit that instead of a 12 club Super League, we could have a 14 club Super League or a 16 club Super League and get away from loop fixtures and all the hassle that provides?
That's a utopia, I think, certainly from a Super League point of view, that we do have a home and away and maybe throw a Magic Weekend event in there as well, because we can't afford to lose events. So I think that is a utopia. Can you, going back 2 years, could you move to 14 teams? Probably not. The player pool wasn't there for me, but I think we're getting closer and closer to that point where the player pool is big enough to go to 14 teams, potentially 16 teams.
I'd love to see player pools in Newcastle, in Coventry, develop the thriving player pools in the southeast. All the London Broncos team weren't playing rugby league that long ago. Someone gave them an opportunity. And there's some fine athletes out there that haven't even thought about rugby league yet. This sort of marketing and this sort of investment in the infrastructure could create those player pools.
But what I don't want to go back to is where we were probably 4 years ago, going to Warrington and getting beat 80-0 because we didn't have the players within our squad to compete with the highest level of teams in that competition. And let's just not throw away the fact that at the minute we've got a competition that is really, really competitive. Whether you've got the viewpoint that it's been dumbed down or whatever, it's still really competitive. And I'd feel comfortable going to a St Helens like we did the year before last and winning. So let's not throw that out of it. We've got to be really careful with opening up the competition that we don't dilute it.
Could you open it up though to create a more national identity for the game? You know, look at Newcastle Falcons, his ownership of the Thunder. Look at Wasps, his ownership of Coventry and so on. I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create that identity.
I think there are certain areas strategically that would be a benefit to Super League. I certainly believe that. But we've got to make sure that we get the right ones, that the infrastructure is right. Damian's absolutely right. You know, player welfare, marketing, all those sort of off-field operations have got to be right at each club. I'm not saying we've got it right at Wakefield. We certainly haven't. There are areas that we've got to get better at. I wouldn't rule out. I've never been a massive sort of cheerleader of expansion. I haven't. I've always thought that we could become the second sport in the north, because we're never going to beat football. Let's not kid ourselves that we're going to get above football. We're not. But can we be that next alternative in the north of England that, if a football fan hasn't got a game on, I'll go and watch York versus Halifax because I'm a York City fan, or I'm a Leeds fan, but I'll go and watch Wakefield versus whoever. Can we get to that position, but also at the same time explore every expansion opportunity there is, because Newcastle is a hotbed. You know, we've been there for 3-4 years at Magic, and it's been a great event.
It'd be great to expand in North Yorkshire a little more as well.
Oh yeah, obviously John Flatman and the board at York have got plans to grow the club, but it needs to be sustainable. You know, we need to get more children playing, create pathways, keep growing the club off the field, and hopefully that'll reflect on the field. But just briefly going back to Newcastle, the distance they've travelled over the last probably 5-6 years is immense. Obviously, not only the quality that you see on the team, the facilities that they use, but the amount of people they've got playing the game up there. They have links with universities, links with college sides. They've got an academy side in Super League. Some of them players playing for Yorkshire Academy. So they're certainly going in the right direction, and if they can continue growing off the field, they could be a real top championship club and beyond in the near future.
Absolutely.
The facilities are great as well. We went up there as a pre-season camp. They hosted us for 3 or 4 days, and it was a really good experience.
It can't all be roses. It's not all going to be nice and fuzzy and roses. There has to be a downside, and that downside is the fittest and the better clubs have to find a way to be at the top of tiers and in part of the expansion at the expense of clubs who are not as strong. And that's just life. And the NRL went through it probably 20 years ago now. They had a criteria and a rationalisation, and they merged some very famous clubs, West Magpies and Illawarra. But to get that strong platform and get the player pool all playing at the best level, and the off-field pool as well. Not every club can have good CEOs and good HR and good digital. You've got to get all the best working in that main structure. The game does have to rationalise. So expansion is often muddled with an either-or argument. It's not. You've got to get the main core of the game optimally performing first. And at the moment, it's spread too thin, and too many clubs aren't of a level. Not too many. There are clubs that aren't of a level, and some clubs doing great things. So I know it's an elephant in the room, but the game has to rationalise. It has to rationalise because the money is spread way too thin across too much mediocrity. It's got to rationalise to get that cream at the top.
I don't think we've quite got enough time left to go on through that one. I do want to come on to State of Origin. We've got the decider coming up this week. Looking forward to it, Damian?
Oh, very much. And I think it's great. It's a great representation of what rugby league is. I think James will agree. And Michael's had some tough results out there on the pitch. The best, two 17s playing each other in the world. If you're not winning the ruck and if things don't go your way early, a hot favourite Queensland team get rolled by 30 points in game 2 who had no right to get beaten in that game. And that's what rugby league is. So that's why we shouldn't react in the game when a team gets beaten, like Widnes on the weekend had a bad result 2 weeks ago against Bulls. That's just rugby league. You can't get hung up on it. It's a really exciting competition.
It's very fine,
End of an era, James, for Queensland. End of an era for Queensland?
Well, the spine of the team that they had is always going to be difficult to replace, obviously. But, as Damian said, it's fine margins in all sports, especially rugby league. If one side just getting on top of you in the ruck, or the kick accuracy is off, or a couple of calls go against you, or you have to make a couple of decisions that aren't great, the balance tips and, scorelines can blow out. And, it doesn't mean that teams aren't trying, doesn't mean teams aren't good. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Shows you what a great player Cameron Smith was, doesn't it? Now he's retired from Origin. I always said that when he retires, that the Queensland and the Australian side will suffer a huge loss. I had a great comment about Cameron Smith when he said he's just reached 400 games, and they said, congratulations to Cameron Smith on his 400th appearance. That's only 14 short of Bill Harrigan's record for refereeing games in Australia. So
it's funny you mentioned Bill Harrigan. There's a massive change in the structure of the game now in Australia, in the NRL and at Origin level. Now only having 2 referees on the pitch as opposed to 3 with Cameron there as well.
The one thing about Cameron Smith that I've always admired, I've never ever seen him flustered.
No.
He plays in a key position. Obviously, teams will have a lot of plans to negate his effect, and I'm sure occasionally they've just thought we'll just wallop him. But I've never seen him look anything other than composed, making great decisions and incredibly skillful. And to do that for over 400 games, he has been, and he will. It has been some player, hasn't he?
I think he'll be an outstanding coach as well, won't he?
Yeah, he can come on the York staff.
For expenses. I think that the State of Origin, again, you go back to events, and we need more of them in this country. We've had junior State of Origin with Yorkshire, Lancashire this year. Yeah. The ladies have played Yorkshire, Lancashire. I'd love to see us get back to a Yorkshire, Lancashire at main level.
Definitely.
I think we've got to learn the lessons of last time, because clearly it fell down last time in terms of numbers of people attending it. But I think we've got a real opportunity to create another event there, and I'd love to see some of our players involved in that as well. I've seen them involved at junior level. I'd love to see some of ours.
The benefit in international level would be huge. Yeah. That's just another level up, all playing around elite players. Yeah. Where the Great Britain sides and the English sides would benefit hugely from that.
Yeah, we have an issue, don't we, mid-season, that we want a mid-season international, but we can't find an opposition that we feel will test England. Yeah. So if we can't find them, let's use that weekend to have the best of the best playing Lancashire, Yorkshire. And if we want to bring in Cumbrians or Londoners, that we feel that will benefit, well, so be it. Have a couple of players on each side that are non-Yorkshire, non-Lancashire.
That'd be very interesting. And our State of Origin in London, yes or no?
Oh, no, look, I think you'd have to prize it away from Queensland or somewhere down there. I mean, they're playing 84,000.
They played in Perth.
Done well in Perth, though.
Yeah, exactly. And that model of having one game at a neutral venue like the MCG or Perth works. And no, there's way too much money down there in that to move it to London, I think.
Thank you, Damian. Well, that's it. That's it for another edition of Rugby League Backchat. My thanks to my guests, Michael Carter, James Ford, and Damian Irvine. And don't forget, you can get involved in the conversation as well on Twitter @RL Backchat. We'll see you next week.